Good morning, Colorado. You are listening to the Daily Sun Up. It's a conversation with the Colorado Sun. I'm team editor David Krause. Before we jump into today's conversation, here is a quick message from our sponsor.
Denver Golf has 8 venues to choose from right in your backyard. From urban golf settings to mountain vistas, you'll find it all at Denver Golf. Plus, Denver Golf has programs and events to fit every golfer. No matter where you live in Denver, there's a venue near you. Come home to play. Denver Golf is your neighborhood course. Headed to the mountains? Before you hit I-70, visit goI70.com for the latest travel tips, real-time road info, and insider advice to help you beat the rush. Plan smarter, travel smoother, and spend more time where you want to be. GoI70.com. More mountains, less traffic. Ready for your next adventure? SCP Wild-Free Colorado Springs Hotel is a reimagined vintage motel and base camp for those who wander with purpose and return with stories. Dog-friendly, planet-conscious, and rooted in our Colorado community. Explore SCP Wild-Free Colorado Springs Hotel and book your unforgettable summer travel today at scphotel.com/Colorado Springs.
Now, back to the show.
Hello, listeners, and welcome to a Midsummer Colorado Friday. I am Kevin Simpson, editor of Sunlit, and the lucky guy who gets to chat with Colorado-connected authors. And today, we have as our guest the Reverend Dr. Nancy Niero, a minister in the United Church of Christ, but also the author of Witness at Sand Creek, The Life and Letters of Silas Soule. Welcome, Nancy.
Kevin, thank you so much for inviting me to the table.
So, full disclosure here, we first connected when I was working on a story just this past spring about Silas Soule and his role in Colorado history. And when I learned that you had written this book that examines not only Soule and his letters, but also your personal journey, so to speak, with him, I knew we needed to circle back and give our readers an opportunity to read more about the impact of such a fascinating guy. And so first, for folks who may not be familiar, tell us the basics. Who was Silas Soule?
My nutshell story is that he was a witness at the Sand Creek Massacre as a captain under the command of John Shivington, and disobeyed orders to go into the massacre the night before. He had journeyed with Cheyenne and Arapaho chiefs during the summer of 1864, had known of promises that had been made by military about a safe, peaceful camp, and he knew on a moral ground that he had to disobey orders, and he did. But he went to the massacre and actually traveled through the massacre as it was happening on his horse, and this is reflective in the letter that he writes that we know about. And so he bears witness to this massacre, and then writes a letter to Ned Wynkoop, along with Lieutenant Joe Kramer, who also disobeyed orders that day out of 600 men. He went on to be the first witness at the congressional testimony, the congressional inquiry in February, and then he was assassinated on the streets of Denver in April 1865, just after getting married to his beloved Hersa. But his story is actually bigger than just that moment in time or those months in time. What I have come to love about him and reassure people a lot and affirm people that, what he did at the Sand Creek Massacre is actually no surprise to anyone who knows of his life. He was a young abolitionist with a group of Kansas men and traveled with John Brown and tried to escort formerly enslaved people to freedom. And so his whole life is kind of a life of commitment and showing up and speaking up and standing up with others. And so his legacy of what he does there is not to be surprised, but just the character of who he was. And his mom and dad are Amasa and Sophia Soule. So I always love to credit them as well, because they were abolitionists in New England and in Chelsea, Massachusetts. And they with other families joined and started the New England Immigration Company, a call to be living in Kansas to keep Kansas free from enslavement. And they all moved to Lawrence in the 1850s. So he grew up in a family of real moral decision makers about what is right and what is wrong and standing with right. So I always like to name his mom and dad. Yeah.
Well, the apple did not fall far from the tree.
That's right.
For sure.
That's right.
So the book itself it deals with his letters, but also your connection to him. And that has manifested itself in various ways over the years. Give us sort of the brief history of how you sort of kept running into him and how his story became so.
I love that, Kevin. I kept running into him. Well, actually, I think he kept running into me, honestly. But thank you for that. I had not formulated that kind of language around this 30-year connection I have with him. Yeah. Well, I worked at the Colorado Historical Society when it was at 13th and Broadway in the old building, and on my first day, I was hired to be a museum educator, caring for the 5,000 young children that came through the museum as part of Colorado history programs in schools. And so, my first day, everyone who knows that building and the staircase know that there is this big staircase, winding staircase that took you down to the basement. And there was a teepee there. This was like in 1995. Yeah. And so and here was his portrait. And I said, "Who is that?" I asked my tour guide, my new employee tour guide. And they said, "Oh, that's Silas Soule. He disobeyed orders at the Sand Creek Massacre." And I knew he was a Civil War era soldier. I knew that. As I've mentioned to you, Kevin, I think he looked like a young Ron Howard. There's something that just a gorgeous looking face staring out at everyone in that portrait. And so whenever I would take kids on tours, I would stop at that portrait and talk about this young man and what he did. So there were probably thousands of kids who, in the course of my time there, who heard about him. Because I just felt like at the time, we don't, and this was in 1985, we just don't always have the stories, and we don't always share the stories of standing up and doing something for justice or doing something that's right in a very wrong situation. And so that would seem very important to me at the time as I think back on that, just how to tell that part of the story, especially for children. So I left and I went to work at Fairmont Heritage Foundation, which is the historic preservation arm for Riverside and Fairmont cemeteries. And I discovered that Silas was buried at Riverside in 2002. And I had a very good friend at the time. She has passed away, Susie Aikman. And I love sharing her name with everyone because she really had been doing a lot of interviewing on Kuvo on Sunday mornings on her Native American music show. And interviewing Sand Creek Massacre descendants well before 2002. She had been very connected with Sand Creek Massacre descendants. And so she told the world where he was buried. And then in 2003, that's when the spiritual healing run started really at Riverside. We hosted, Susie and I and Otto, braided hair, Northern Cheyenne. We hosted a gathering, and then the spiritual healing run became that.
Right. We should interject maybe tell folks what the spiritual healing run is. It's 173 miles, I think, from the site of the Sand Creek Massacre to downtown Denver, with the Arapaho and Cheyenne folks, and really, I guess others participate as well. And it's a spiritual healing run, just what the name implies. And they now regularly stop at Silas Soule's grave at Riverside Cemetery, and that's where a lot of this is really sort of expanded.
Absolutely, Kevin. In 2003, when the three of us hosted that first gathering for a ceremony there at his grave, it had never been done before. No one had known really where he was. And so thankfully, he's in Denver, and there's a lot of people who visit his grave throughout the year, in part because he is in Denver. But that ceremony has gone on for decades now, and it is a very inclusive ceremony that does begin in at the massacre site and follows then the path of the Colorado soldiers who came back from Denver after the massacre. But there are a lot of people who are not Cheyenne or Arapaho that find this connectional piece as important for their own healing and reconciliation work around the pain and the hurt and the grief and the sorrow around John Shivington, and for lots of other reasons, I'm sure, feel compelled and called to be part of that run as well. So it comes through Riverside Cemetery in the morning. Nowadays, it's in October, but it used to be over the Thanksgiving weekend, which is traditionally the anniversary time. So there's a ceremony, and there's sage burned, and there's drummers, and there's sing, and then historically Byron Strom, who is the descendant of Silas, a great nephew of Silas, historically reads the letter that Silas wrote to Ned Wynkoop at the invitation of Otto, which is the letter that documents what had happened at Sand Creek by this eyewitness of Silas, who wrote in incredible detail about what he saw, not just massacring elders, women, and children, but tremendous detail in that, but also then the removal of body parts of people that they had just murdered as trophies, and they brought those body parts back to Denver. So it's a letter that is read every year there, and for I think a lot of people who have never been to his grave or even on the healing run, hearing that letter is the first time that they've heard the words of that letter read out loud, or even heard that there was a letter. So it's an important part of the ceremony, that letter. And then the runners run right by his grave and then run to Denver and to the plaque that commemorates the intersection of where he was assassinated, and then run to usually the state capitol and then to the History Museum afterwards.
So getting back a little bit to your connection, and you ran into him again as you were a student in seminary, right?
Yeah.
Your degrees and you, in fact, I think you described the forces that led you to write your book as divine intervention.
Absolutely, I do.
What's the story there?
Well, I've been to seminary twice now, and when I went to Iliff School of Theology, I was blessed to have the opportunity to have 4 independent studies. I don't know if that's still allowed anymore, but that seemed even excessive to me. But I was granted permission for every one of them. And so I really, at that point, this is like in 2007, 2008, and I was really committed to trying to find out more about who he was, not just the story of the Sand Creek Massacre. I felt like I had had a big picture of that, but I was curious to know what, and I still am, hence the book that came out. How do we raise children to be like this? What happened in his lifetime that helped him be able to know right from wrong and pick right over and over again when faced with the discernment of a moral moment of where moral courage is part of the ending of it. And so I really at that point wanted to know a lot more about what his life was like before the Sand Creek Massacre. How does somebody do this in his 20s still? I mean, he's a young guy. So I wrote a biography, I wrote a theological construction, I wrote a social justice genre play with him, and then I performed that play. And those were the 4 independent studies that I did. And I thought I thought that was that. I thought, oh, okay, well, I started my hospice chaplaincy career, and I thought that was that. But I had gone to Kansas, the Kansas State Historical Society in Topeka. I did research. It was very it was more than just 4 independent studies, I guess. And then that was not that. It was not the end of that. And I ended up through a variety of different circumstances, and life is life. I never thought I'd go back to school again, but lo and behold, in 2019, I went back for a Doctor of Ministry degree at Phillips Theological Seminary in Tulsa. And with him in mind, I actually filled out my application with his name in it in my application essay, that I wanted to explore, in part because of what I had done with his work. He had come from a Congregationalist family, and I knew faith had played a big part in his life. And we see that reflected in several letters to his mom and his sisters particularly. But the moral grounding of what growing up in faith and in this particular denomination, I knew he was a man of faith. And so I wanted to kind of tie in. And so my thesis was, when I went to school, and it never changed, was can storytelling of white ancestors of faith and resistance help dismantle white silence in UCC churches by seeing others show up, stand up, and speak up with people of color in the 19th century. That I came to school with that, and I ended school with that. And so he was one of those white ancestors of faith and resistance that I called into in my work. And then I just continued to stay committed to the course of that for the 4 years. And the other 2 were Harriet Beecher Stowe and John Brown, in part because there's a circle of those 3, Silas, Harriet, and John Brown. Silas knew John Brown, hugely influenced by his abolitionist work. And it was Harriet Beecher Stowe's Uncle Tom's Cabin that Silas's mom read in the parlor of their Chelsea, Massachusetts home when it was being reprinted in the Boston newspaper. And that book, Harriet Beecher Stowe's Uncle Tom's Cabin, inspired Silas's dad to join the New England Emigration Company to go to Kansas to keep Kansas free from enslavement. So there's this divine intervention of all 3 of them being in relationship together, but no one has ever put them together except now me. So I got out of school. I graduated with the Doctor of Ministry degree in 2023, and I bumped into literally this divine intervention place. I bumped into Chris Driscoll, who's the publisher of Exact Rush Publishing, and he did a pitch at a meeting of the Society of Race and Religion in Denver at ILIF in 2023, and I I just loved his vibe, and I loved that he was starting this new way of scholars being connected in small publishing houses. And so I just went back home after the day I met him. I went back home and I said, I have two ideas for a book. And I had never really thought that I had a book in me, which is also part of the divine intervention place. But I wrote a note to him and said, so I have this, dissertation, dismantling white silence in UCC churches, using storytelling of white ancestors of faith and resistance who showed up, spoke up, and stood up with people of color in the 19th century. And then I said, I'm formulating this email as I'm thinking out loud, like, I have these letters. I have 25. At the time, I didn't have 25 letters, but I had a collection of letters. And I said, oh, and I also have a collection of letters from Silas Soule, and here's who he is. And I would write an essay with every one of the letters, and I hit send. And he wrote back and said, we're going to pass on your dissertation, but we have all fallen in love with Silas Soule. And I said, let's go. And so that's how we started. And that's how we came to a book. Yeah.
Right. Well, I'd like to talk a little bit about a ritual that you have of reading Silas Soule's letters on or around his birthday in July. Tell us how that got started and why it's important to you to sort of continue that tradition, even though you have since moved from Denver to the Pacific Northwest.
That's right. Yeah. Thanks, Kevin. That is, I love ritual. I'm a pastor who loves ritual, and ritual is in everything. I do in my ministry, but also as a hospice chaplain for 15 years, ritual became very important for me every day, visiting patients and families about what I needed to bring with me besides me. But did we need an anointing? Did you need me to bring bread and juice? Do you need me to bring prayer? I was very mindful of every day what I needed to bring with me in this place of ritual for patients and families. So it was my cornerstone of ministry really is about remembering and honoring and celebrating and journeying with the mystery of the end of life. And all of that kind of has turned into like other ways of ritual for me. And so, honestly, I've been thinking a lot about this question of how long have I been doing it? But all I can say is I've been doing it for a long time. And so, and it, I would invite a circle of my friends to come out, and maybe one or two people came out, but I would read all of his letters at his grave on or near his birthday. And part of that is like how, I really appreciated the reflection of the article that you wrote in May around going to see his grave on his the anniversary of his assassination in April. And when I have discerned over the course of many years now, what days do we remember and what days do we celebrate? Do we remember the anniversary of a death, or do we remember the birth of a life that was incredibly well lived and cut down by an assassin? And so this like ongoing, how do we remember, and where is memory making in all of this? And for some people, including myself, remembering the anniversary of a death is a powerful ritual in itself. Just the acknowledgement of ongoing grief and sorrow, or the celebration of whatever that might feel like for people. But I really kind of, after discerning this, for a long time. Really, I wanted to kind of like remember him on his birthday. And so that's how this ritual started. I read his letters. Now they're 25. When I started, there were not 25. But in the course of writing the book, Byron Strom, the great nephew of Silas, who is the owner of the collection of letters that have been shared for decades now by his family, and now he does it too. But that the idea that let's think about this life, this life beyond just what happened at Sand Creek, but how do we remember him? And so I thought, well, it's how let's just read his letters. We can remember him and his life. And every year I've done it, Kevin, I glean something new that I thought I had gleaned everything that I could from him and these letters that he wrote. Most of them are to his mom and his sisters, and every year I like, oh, that broke open something new for me.
But people show up and listen.
Yeah, people
right?
show up and listen. Yeah.
Okay.
And it's very, I will say, intentional randomness. There are people. Last year, I showed up on his birthday, and I was reading letters, and there were two people who came independently of each other, came to the grave while I was reading letters. It was like maybe a dozen folks out there, and they were like, "Oh, I didn't know you did this." And one of them had a dog named Silas, and one of them had a dog named Hersa. Not knowing each other, showing up at the grave, is so magical. So yeah, I put out an event notice and to my community and people, and who shows up is who shows up, and it's a very centering place for me. I've been to his grave hundreds of times, but it's always kind of coming back to a place I'm very familiar with him. And yeah,
And so you've got one coming up. It's July 25th. Is that right?
That's right.
On the Saturday,
at 9 o'clock in the morning.
9 o'clock
at Riverside.
At Riverside Cemetery, which is, and people could look it up on the map. It's just on north near the what used to be the stockyards.
That's right. That's right. Yeah. It's off of I-70, the Brighton Boulevard exit, and you just keep going north. The entrance has changed in the last few years to the cemetery because of the light rail accommodation. So you just keep going.
It's well marked. It's well marked, so folks could find their way there. Yeah. Well, I want to mention, of course, we've got an excerpt from Witness at Sand Creek coming up on Sunday, as well as an author Q&A. So be sure to check that out. And Nancy, I hope you have lots of company for this year's book reading.
Me too. Whoever shows up, and it's about 2.5 hours. So I hope everyone will come who wants to come and just listen to a life told through letters. Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you for joining us, Nancy. We appreciate it.
Kevin, it's been my joy. Thank you so much. I really so grateful that Sunlit is out there, and I'm a part of it. And I thank you for all your work on bringing this story to the public in so many different ways. Thank you. I'm really grateful for the readers who have really responded to the story of Silas.
Well, and thank you, listeners, for joining us and making the Daily Sun Up part of your day. Have a great weekend.
Thanks for listening. And finally, here are a few stories that you should know about today.
Despite challenges for Colorado's water supply, fire crews say they have all the water they need to fight fires raging across the state. Fire teams said they've heard concerns about their water use, but the amount they're drawing isn't enough to impact local supplies. If a small pond wasn't available, crews easily found other options. A new lawsuit blames power lines owned by a Southern Colorado electric company for igniting the Aspen Acres fire, which now ranks as the 7th largest wildfire in state history. The lawsuit filed Wednesday alleges San Isabel Electric Association was negligent and that a downed power line was a substantial factor in causing the fire. The Colorado State Land Board has approved a solar farm on 1,140 acres of trust land in Pueblo County. The lease for the solar farm could bring in more than $26 million in fees, which would go to the Public School Trust for building schools and supporting the School Finance Act.
To read these stories and much more, visit our website, coloradosun.com. As an award-winning nonprofit news outlet, we take our mission of credible, independent journalism seriously, and you can check out our trust indicators at coloradosun.com/ethics. Our music is by the Denver-based Matt Skellinger Group. A link to their music is in our show notes, and a special thanks to Swallow Hill Music. I'm David Krause. See you next time.